It's the day after our trip to Selkirk and our visit to the Sweat Lodge, so I can let you know what actually went on. In the morning we spent a bit of time chatting to Mary, and then we went and spent some time with Ernest Daniels, who is one of the elders on the pastoral care team, or the spiritual care team at the hospital, and his colleague, whose name escapes me for the minute, a lady, very nice lady. She's also one of the elders. And I probably ought to explain that you become an elder in this culture not by merely being old, but you can become an elder at any age, and it's really someone that the community recognises as having particular gifts or wisdom in a particular area or of expertise, I suppose. So it could be something to do with healing, could be to do with so knowledge of herbs and that kind of thing, could be to do with things like having the gift of giving spiritual names, leading sweat lodges, that kind of thing. So you can be an elder at any age, considered an elder, but it's something that the community does and recognises. It's not something that just automatically happens to you. So anyway, we spent some time chatting to them, and they were explaining some of the sort of ceremonies and stuff that the community sort of traditionally would have got involved in. Probably the most usual one, or the most common one, would be the pipe ceremony, where they share a pipe together, and that is really the tobacco that they're smoking there. Well, they're not sort of taking it down into their lungs as you would when you were smoking a pipe. In our culture, you just kind of take it into your mouth and blow it out, and that's supposed to represent your prayers. So it's a bit like using incense. It's supposed to represent your prayers going up to the Creator. And it's also worth mentioning that there's a real emphasis on the fact that native people Aboriginal people don't worship the creation; they worship the Creator, and that they would say that the spirits that they engage with are actually extensions of, or I suppose are part of the spirit of the Creator, the Great Spirit, who breathes His Spirit, His life, into all of creation. So it's about kind of connecting with the world around you and using that for prayer, and engaging in prayer through that natural world. So anyway, so there's things like the pipe ceremony, and one of the other ones, one of the main ones, is the Sweat Lodge. Now the Sweat Lodge is mainly about purification. It's meant to be about purifying yourself, so you sweat out all of the impurities in your body, but it's also got a majorly spiritual dimension, because there's not a real sort of distinguishing between spiritual and physical things. The idea is that in the sweat, it's part of physically you're purifying yourself, but you're also praying at the same time. What happens is that the stones are heated up that are going to be put into the lodge itself, on a fire, and the big stones that are heated are called grandfathers, because we're praying in sort of communion with those who have died and gone before us. I guess in the Christian tradition we talk about the communion of the saints. But these stones represent the grandfathers who are going to be praying with us, and they're heated up, and then they're placed inside a lodge. Now the lodge is built of sort of sort of stones, branches, willow branches, which are sort of bent over in a sort of to look like an igloo, in a sort of an arc shape, and those are tied together at various points where they sort of intersect. The branches intersect. And they are then covered over with a tarpaulin or blankets or both, and then you go and sit inside the lodge, and the grandfather stones are introduced and are welcomed. So there were 13 of us in the sweat yesterday, and they start off by putting 5 stones, a centre stone which represents the Creator, and then one for the north, south, east and west, and each of those points represent different things in Aboriginal spirituality. And as each of them come in, then there's a phrase is said to welcome them. I can't remember what the words are, but it's something like "We welcome you." And then cedar, which is one of the 4 sacred plants, is sprinkled on the stones, and sort of fills the air with sort of an incense type thing. Then what happens? So yeah, then the main door is kind of closed, and water is sprinkled on the stones or poured on the stones, and that creates a huge blast of heat, which is really quite overwhelming. And then the drum is used, which is again is seen as a spiritual thing. It's not seen as just a physical instrument to be played, but it represents the heartbeat of the Creator and the heartbeat of the people. And then there's some chanting and singing. And then what we did is we took it in turns to pray from the east door where we came in. There was 2 or 3 people prayed, and then we stopped, and then the door was opened and some fresh air was let in and some of the heat escaped so that we could cool off a little bit. We had a bit of a sort of a chat, and it was very relaxed, much more relaxed than I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be quite sort of intense and serious, which is probably the way I would run it, but it was quite relaxed and laid back, and people had a bit of a chat. And then the next 5 stones were introduced, and again we then came in. Similar thing, had another song, more water poured on to create an even hotter blast of heat, and again we went round and prayed. And that went on for 4 different times, so the door was opened 4 times for each of the compass points. How did it feel? Physically it was very overwhelming. Physically it was incredibly hot. I mean, I guess if you like saunas and you're used to saunas, then it wouldn't be particularly challenging for you physically, but for me it was very, very hot. Fortunately I'd had a bowl of soup and some bread to eat before I went in, and that was absolutely essential. I should have had slightly more to eat than that, because I was very, very lightheaded. Definitely in need of sugar by the end of it. My hands, right the way down to kind of my forearms, was all completely tingly, and didn't have any strength in my hands, and not very much in my legs either. So I was quite lightheaded. The only way you can sort of get away from the heat is if you put your towel over your face like that and breathe through the towel, and that kind of diminishes the sort of impact of the heat. So it means you can get some oxygen into you. So I guess I didn't get a huge amount out of it spiritually, which was quite interesting, because I thought I kind of would, and I wanted to. But I think it's probably one of those things that you have to do it a couple of times to get used to the physical side of it before you can then kind of engage at more sort of spiritual depth as well. Although I don't want to write off the physical impact of it, because that's part of the prayer itself, and is obviously an important part of it. But because I was kind of not nervous, but because I wasn't sure what was happening and what it was all about, I didn't think I could relax and kind of get as much out of it as I might do if I were to do it again. So it's definitely something I'll try back at home with some of the guys from Legacy, and also the girls as well, because it was a mixed sweat, and I think that could be really good for sort of developing stuff, and sort of the girls going off and doing some stuff on their own as well. So I'd definitely do it again, but I'd definitely take something sugary in to drink, so that it wasn't quite so lightheaded, and I probably wouldn't chuck quite as much water on the stones, because I think Ernest was perhaps a little overzealous with the water in creating the heat, until you get used to it. But it's definitely a very sort of physical way of drawing you into prayer, and yeah, I think it could be very helpful, and perhaps tweaked slightly and adapted, and different emphasis placed on slightly different things. But yeah, really interesting experience, and well worth doing.